How's it going, guys? Kyle Brotherson here with Dirt Bike Channel. This is the Dirt Bike Channel podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I want to apologize to you guys for being a little bit lackadaisical and being a little bit late with this podcast. I've had so many things going on in the last week, and I had a dirt bike trip. We took some bikes down to southern Utah, down to St. George, Warner Valley, Santa Clara, and did some riding. Earlier this week, I took down the Beta 2020 Beta 300RR. I also took down my 2019 KTM 300 XCW TPI to drop off to one of my buddies down there to have him put some more time on that bike over the next couple of months. And I also took down my 2020 KTM 250 XC TPI, and we did some riding. So we had a good time. I don't want to spoil any of the stuff that happened on the beta. There will be lots of content coming out on that. I'm trying to get some things dialed in. That bike is not exactly the way I want it straight out of the box. I mean, I've done some setup on it, but I've got to do some more because it kind of beat me up. The bike is not exactly how I need it to be for me to enjoy it, and so I'm going to do some more playing around with that. But today's podcast, I want to get into this because the topic for today is that dirt bikes are safer than ATVs, and I have some reasons why I want to talk to you about that. And I'm not trying to put any dark shame on people. I think this is a dirt bike podcast, but I do want maybe this to be something that maybe you could share with someone who is more scared of what happens with dirt bikes, because I think there's a little bit of a stigma here in dirt bikes that is not exactly accurate. It's so often that sometimes people will just end up believing what they want to believe, and I'm guilty of that too. Everyone is to a certain extent. You believe what you want to believe. You might have heard it once. It might be the principle of primacy, which is the first time you hear about a concept or whatever that angle is at that time, that'll be your view on that going forward. It's very hard for us to, make a second impression on anything. But in this case, I have come around to a different view of dirt bikes and four-wheelers and UTVs than I started with. Specifically, when I was growing up, so I was born in 1981. That dates me, so I'm 38 years old. I'll be 39 this year. When I was growing up, four-wheelers were just kind of starting to come in. Obviously, there had been dirt bikes forever, motorcycles for a long, long time. And then they had kind of a three-wheeler phase there in the early 80s and mid-80s and stuff. And then that just wasn't a great idea. So then they started putting four wheels on these things, and the ATV is born with four wheels, and they have served a good purpose. ATV is all-terrain vehicle, right? A dirt bike is an all-terrain vehicle. A four-wheeler is an all-terrain vehicle. But typically speaking, when we talk about dirt bikes with two wheels and ATVs with four. It just seemed like, the thought at that time was that four-wheelers were safer than dirt bikes. I know that my parents thought that, and I don't have any, I'm not, mad at them or upset at them because they were doing the best that they could. And things evolve over time. And as data comes in and as people get more and more experience over time, you can, your opinion of things and your, perception of things can evolve. So my story is I spent my entire childhood riding four-wheelers. I think we got a four-wheeler when I was about 7 years old, and I was riding that four-wheeler forever, and we had a bunch of different four-wheelers. My dad rode Harleys and street bikes and Nortons, and he had, he's had a bunch of different street bikes his entire life. Very good motorcycle rider, street bike rider, and also had a dual sport dirt bike that he would take on mountain roads and things. But he just figured that, the bikes are big and heavy, and the stigma was that dirt bikes, you just go super fast and you go off big jumps and you get hurt. Well, I have a totally different view of this now. The view that I have of this now is when you're on four wheels, first off, it's a heavy vehicle. And separation between you and the vehicle becomes an issue whenever there is a problem. So let's just talk about four-wheelers for just a second. You're straddling this four-wheeler, and you've got these wheels out on the four corners, and you're literally going along for the ride. And if something happens to that four-wheeler, if the chassis is upset, it rocks around and takes you with it. I mean, just think of a basic hill climb for just a second. If you've ever been on a four-wheeler and you've done any hill climbing, you've had that time where you either powered out or lost traction or whatever. And if you're just going straight up the hill, kind of perpendicular to the hill, now what? You can't turn the thing around. If you try to do like a J turn on a hill, a steep hill on a four-wheeler, what's going to happen? It's going to roll. And what happens when it rolls? It takes you with it. And you can't separate from the vehicle. It just, don't ask me how I know. I've done this so often where you cannot separate from it. Just go look at YouTube and Google four-wheeler rollover. It takes you with it. It just like rolls you over and you can't get away from it for whatever reason. If you're on a dirt bike and you go up a super steep hill and you power out, you just boom, tip the bike into the hill. No harm, no foul. No one breaks any bones. No one gets an 800-pound machine rolling over them and cavitating their cavity and so you get that. Rolling on four-wheelers is very, very dangerous. On a hill climb, maybe you're going around a corner a little too fast and you're sliding out, and then all of a sudden the tire hooks up and boom, the thing rolls over and takes you with it. It just happens. The worst wrecks that I've ever had were on four-wheelers, where it was just like the thing took me with it. The other thing is that it gives you this false sense of security. So I rode Banshees and I rode Yamaha Banshees, Yamaha Warrior, all these different four-wheelers growing up. And there's such a sense of security when you're on those things that a lot of times a lot of people are not wearing helmets. A lot of people are not wearing boots. People are not wearing long sleeve shirts. They're not wearing gloves. And now it's just the danger to you and the injury that you have is magnified because you're not actually wearing the proper safety gear. I certainly know that I wasn't. The worst crash that I ever had, I was like 16, 17, 18, somewhere there. I was on a four-wheeler, thing rolled on me and just had a really bad time smashing my head on the ground because I wasn't wearing a helmet. I'm sure I gave myself a concussion. Long story I won't get into, but the point is, there's that false sense of security that you get with two wheels really, really can get you into trouble. It's even more magnified, I think, on a UTV. On a UTV, like a Razor or a Can-Am, Maverick or any of these, I'm getting all the names wrong, but you know what I'm talking about. These 2,000 pound, 2,500 pound, basically mini trophy trucks that have 1,000 horsepower motors and a steering wheel and a roll cage and a seatbelt, which no one wears, by the way, and they require zero skill at all, like zero skill. Within the first 1 minute of stepping into one of those Razors or whatever, and I'm not like calling out Polaris or anything, I'm just using that as a general term. You can get in that thing and you can kill yourself in 1 minute. And the scary part too is that you might be carrying 3 other passengers. So here's a little bit of imagery for you. And if you've been out in the backcountry very often, very much, you might have seen this exact same thing. So one day, I'm out there, in central Utah, out kind of by Cherry Creek, over by the sand dunes. You guys know where I'm talking about if you're from Utah. And we come up on, we're coming back to the truck, and all of a sudden we see right by the truck, there's a cloud of dust. And we're just going to the truck, and then the dust clears, and there's a UTV flipped on its top. And there are 4 teenagers flying everywhere. There's blood, there's hair, there's flip-flops, and there's tank tops. Everything is strewn all over the place. You know what there wasn't, though? There wasn't a helmet. There weren't gloves. There weren't goggles. There wasn't anything. The seatbelts were still in the Razor. People sit there and they think that, oh, I've got so much control here and I'm safe. I've got a roll cage. Guess what? That roll cage just smashes you when you're not wearing any of the proper safety gear and you're not wearing any of the seatbelts. You should be in a 5-point flipping harness the way that some of the people are driving these things. And the reason why they drive them like that is because the vehicle can do it. And it gives them so much confidence, and they just get in there and like, hey, I'm just going to become, the next whatever Evel Knievel driver. Look at how awesome I am. And it requires zero skill, and it requires zero effort to just go in there. You just get in the thing and you punch it, and you're like, whoa, this is super fun. And then guess what? Somebody gets rolled over and they die. I mean, it's crazy because it doesn't require any skill. Those machines don't require anything from you in order to kill yourself or someone else. Dirt bikes, on the other hand, are different. With a dirt bike, yes, there are people that have died. There are people that, maybe are doing some crazy motocross jump or something, or doing a cliff jump and they die. Like everyone has seen things like that. But here's the deal. Short of riding off of a cliff in your first 60 seconds, like if you've never been on a dirt bike and you go out there, there's the only way you could kill yourself in the first 60 seconds is to basically drive it right off of a cliff. Other than that, it's nearly impossible to become seriously injured when you're just starting out in dirt bikes. But in your first 60 seconds, either on a four-wheeler or on a UTV, you can kill yourself and someone else. But you can't do that on a dirt bike. A dirt bike requires so much more out of you. Before you have to earn the ability to really seriously injure yourself. Now, I know there are exceptions to every rule. Like maybe you get on a dirt bike and no one has taught you how to use the clutch, and so you sit there and you rev it to the moon, and then all of a sudden you kind of dump the clutch, and next thing you know, it's taking you for a ride, and you go through a barn door or something like that. We've seen these things on like America's Funniest Home Videos, and you're laughing your head off. Like, I'm not saying you can't get hurt, but the point is this: if you're actually doing this sport right, we are so exposed when we're on a dirt bike. We're like kind of an exposed nerve in some ways. And so guess what? We'll be wearing a helmet at the very least. If we have any idea what we're doing, we'll be wearing riding boots, which protect our feet and our ankles. We'll be wearing riding pants. We'll be wearing long sleeves. We'll be wearing goggles and gloves and etc. because you're so exposed and you know it. Contrasting that to when you get in that UTV with the roll cage that you think is going to save you, in these racing seats or whatever that you don't ever even buckle into, you think you're so safe there. And on that four-wheeler, it didn't require any balance or anything. So you're like, why would I need a helmet? I'm just going to go down the road here. Next thing you know, you're trying to show off for somebody and you go down the road, you give a little bit too much throttle, you turn the thing and boom, you flip the thing and it rolls over you and you're in the hospital and you don't remember anything. These things happen, but on a dirt bike, yeah, you can get hurt, but generally not in your first little bit because you got to earn that ability. You got to earn the ability to hurt yourself. I fully believe that. With my kids, I am so much more comfortable with them on a small dirt bike that only weighs 120 pounds that never actually goes on top of them versus a 400 to 800 pound machine that does go on top of them, does take them with it, and will crush their little bodies. It will, and they don't care. But because of this exposure that you have on the dirt bike, that there's nothing between you and the ground. There's nothing between you and the road, the dirt, wherever you are. You respect it. You learn to respect the bike. You learn to respect the terrain. And you work up your skills over time, and it's a beautiful thing. You start slow, and it's like, line upon line. You grow slowly over time. You work on your skills over time. The bikes get bigger. The bikes get more power. Whatever it is, sometimes the bikes get lighter. Sometimes you start with a really heavy bike, but it never really crushes you because it just tips over. On that hill climb, it just tips over into the hill and no biggie. And then you figure out how to, get it perpendicular to the hill and you pick it up and you ride it down. It's not that big of a deal. And as your skills increase, your speed increases. I mean, that's natural. As your skills evolve, the terrain evolves with it, and it keeps pace. And these things go at a natural pace, and it depends on your personality. It depends on how much risk you want to take. And I'm not saying that people don't get hurt. They get hurt. I mean, this is a hobby, and this is the thing where you're mixing speed and you're mixing terrain and you're mixing all these other factors. And yes, I'm not saying you don't get hurt. You do get hurt. I mean, you don't always have to get hurt. It depends on where you're riding and what things are happening and what your personality is and a lot of different things. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that you can't get hurt on a dirt bike. You absolutely can. But I just think that, if you're the type of person that has, throws all caution to the wind, a dirt bike is going to actually be better for you. Because if you throw all caution to the wind on a UTV or a four-wheeler, you're going to get hurt worse because you'll be throwing that caution to the wind in the first part of your evolution as that, pilot who's driving that thing. With the dirt bike, you're going to build your speed. You're going to build your technique. I cannot tell you how often I'm riding, even just this week. You have kind of like these close calls or whatever. Maybe some rock kind of kicks your back end around or whatever, or you're, coming around a corner and you're pushing it really hard and you feel the front end to start to wash out, but then you just have the muscle memory, the skill to be able to just, save it because it's ingrained in you. There's hundreds and hundreds of hours, thousands of hours of, you trying to become one with the machine. And so the longer you ride, the less you wreck. Like you go through this stage where, in the beginning, maybe you don't wreck at all, and then maybe you start to push yourself a little bit. And then maybe you do start having kind of some hiccups here and there and some get-offs is what I call them. I kind of say you've got get-offs, you got tip-overs, and you've got wrecks. I don't have a ton of wrecks. I have a lot of get-offs and I have a lot of tip-overs. I dump the bike a lot, but I don't wreck a lot. You know what I mean? And wrecks are the ones where I think you can get hurt. Not always, because I tore my ACL just, on a tip over, getting up on a log on a trials or a rock on a trials bike and falling off of that and boom, tearing the ACL because I think I had my knee locked. But the point is our skills increase, our speed increases. Sometimes the speeds come down as we start to do nastier and nastier terrain, but our skills are keeping pace with the difficulty level. And after a few years, you're literally zipping down the trail. And yeah, you've had some bumps and bruises. You might have broken a pinky. You might have been like me and had an ACL tear 8 or 9 years in. You might have had a broken bone here or there. You might have had a collarbone that you got that was broken. You might have broken a toe or something. Heaven forbid. Maybe you had something crazy happen or you weren't wearing the right boots or whatever. But the point is that now you're several years into this and you're wiser. You're experienced. You're calculating. You're not just taking, unnecessary risks. You know your limits because if you've slowly pushed those limits and expanded those limits and expanded your boundaries and expanded your horizons. You've been doing this now for a long time. You might have 100 hours under your belt. You might have 200 hours. You might have 2,000 hours or 5,000 hours. And what has come with that is your ability to know what's going to happen, your ability to calculate how to get through things. You have now gotten to the point where you're using far less energy than you did when you first started. You're riding more terrain, you're riding more difficult terrain, you're riding quicker, and you're expending less energy than you did when you started because you have gained all of these skills and you have grown. And it's taken some blood, maybe. I know it's taken lots of sweat. And it's taken a lot of determination to gain the ground that you have gained. And you should be proud. I am. I think it's one of the things that keeps me coming back is just every once in a while, you'll go to a place, for the first time and you'll see some obstacle or you'll see some trail and it'll be like really difficult for you. And it's just ingrained in your mind how difficult that was. And then, you'll be proud of yourself that you got through it, but you're like, man, that was rough. That was so rough because it took this out of me and it took this out of me. And I dumped the bike here and I dumped the bike there and it was so hard and it was so scary, and then maybe a year or 2 or 5, you keep doing it. You go back to that same place and oh my goodness, what was difficult before is now more just a bump in the road. Now it's not so difficult. You're just thinking, this is amazing. And that is so much fun. And you haven't, hopefully, had those major injuries. Yes, it sometimes happens. Sometimes bad things happen. But honestly, you have gained so much and you've evolved so much that dirt bikes are not dangerous. I mean, some of the things you do might be dangerous, but you're taking calculated risks now. Yeah, and some of the people, and this happens with me, some of the people will take a look at the things that you're doing. Maybe you post a picture on Instagram or you upload a video to YouTube or something. And some people will look at the things that you're doing 5 to 15 years into this sport, and they'll think you're crazy. And they'll tell you how dangerous it is. But the difference between them and you is they didn't see the thousands of hours of practice you put in. They didn't see how many times you took off the boots soaking wet not because of a river, but soaking wet because of sweat. They didn't see the sweat running down your face hundreds and hundreds of times as you had your, breathing, your heart beating out of your chest and just sucking wind and all these things because you've been practicing and you've been working. They haven't seen that. All they see is, Netflix or, some other thing. Maybe they're into golf or maybe they're into softball or baseball or basketball. Or the point is, you've had to put in a lot of effort to get here. And actually what you're doing is a calculated risk, and it's relatively safe. In a lot of ways, it's safe. Riding your dirt bike now is like walking to you. In some cases, you might be more comfortable riding than walking. Even that happened to me even this week. We were down there in St. George, and we're kind of along the edge of this cliff face, and we're kind of going right by the edge of the cliff because it's super fun, and there was a line right there, and I'm following behind one of my buddies, and I watch him kind of go in between two rocks and just blip the throttle and kind of jump over a little bit of a gap that has like a drop off below it. And I just did it in stride. I'm watching him. I'm 10 feet behind him. I saw him do it, and boom, I just go blip across it, and then we stop and we walk back there. And I kind of felt a little bit uncomfortable walking right there. Because walking, I'm in, these stupid riding boots that don't, allow me to walk or anything. They don't have the greatest traction. And I was more nervous to walk in that section than I was to ride in that section. Because on that, you've got the momentum with you. You've got the tires down on the ground. You've got the clutch. You've got all these things. You've got forward progress going one way. And it's extremely difficult to knock something like that offline when it's moving. You've got that inertia. And I wasn't concerned at all. I was just like, oh, this is awesome. And, blip the throttle and jump over this little gap thing here, and we're good to go. But then I go walk on it, and I'm like, whoa, this is really sketchy to walk on. And I get it from all different angles. They're like, you're crazy. I can't believe you did this, or I can't believe you did that. And my response back is, if you had put in the time, and I'm not saying I'm the best rider ever. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is, you say back to them, if you had put in the time and the effort and the energy and the practice and the mental practice that I've put in, and suddenly this is a no-brainer. And it isn't dangerous. Look at the gear that I'm wearing. I mean, even another thing that happened, there was a hill climb that I was doing, and I was the first one up the hill. It's kind of loose and rocky, and I didn't really give it the beans. I'm on the Beta, 2020 Beta 300RR, and I didn't give it the beans, and I made it like, 2/3 of the way up the hill, and I stopped. And up on the hill, at the top of the hill, there was like a teardrop turn. So you'd go up and you could do a teardrop turn and then come right back down. And you did a teardrop turn around this little bush that's up there, I don't know what kind of bush it is, but it's a bush. And so then a couple of my other buddies, they do better than me, and they go zipping right up it, and they get up to the top, and they turn around and they come back down. I'm like, I got to get up there because this Beta got, I was the problem here. I didn't give it enough. And so I'm down at the bottom, and it's kind of rough. There's not a really good run up to it and everything. And there's all these rocks on the hill climb and everything. But I kick it into second gear, and I just give it the business, right? And I'm wearing $3,500 in gear. Let me say that again. I'm wearing $3,500 in gear. Maybe just a little bit more, because I've got knee braces on. That's like $2,000 with the knee braces that I'm using. I'm wearing a $650 Fly Formula helmet. I'm wearing $500 CD boots. I'm wearing $150 pants. I'm wearing a $50 jersey. I'm wearing $50 gloves. I'm wearing $50 goggles. I'm wearing a chest protector and a neck brace that is $400. I'm just ripping these things off. But I did the math on it. I'm wearing between $3,400 and $3,700 worth of gear. And I'm not saying you have to do that. But if you have some good gear, if you have good helmets, a good helmet, good boots, some things to cover your hands, goggles, these type of things, you are protected in a way that no one else is on a UTV. And so what happens is I rip up this thing with all this safety gear on, and this time I make it easily. Like, it was just so much easier from the first time. I make it super easily, and I go up to that teardrop, up to the top to do that turn, and it's really steep. And I just crank the bars all the way to the left, And I'm used to riding my, a different bike on a KTM, and I'm used to just a little bit more steering turn. And so I whip that bar all the way over to the left. I hit the radiators, and I try to whip it down. But guess what? It didn't turn quite as tight as I thought. My bad. And now I'm tipping because it won't turn down the hill. And so I try to gas it, to get it to whip down. And I'm just not quite, I'm in second gear, and I go and I try to gas it, and it doesn't. Just, if I was in first gear, it would have went and it would have pointed downhill, but it didn't. And so I start tipping, and it's a freaking steep hill. And I try to jump off the front of the bike because I know I'm going down. And basically my feet get tangled up in, my legs get tangled up on the handlebars, and I face plant into the hill, into a rocky, steep hill with a brand new $650 helmet on. And I hit the ground hard. So hard that I'm sure that I've torn my camera off, my point of view camera off. I'm sure that I've broken my visor, and I pound into the ground, pile drive my head into the ground. And I get up, and I've now skidded, 20 feet down. My bike is 10 feet from where the turn was, and I'm 10 feet from the bike. So I'm 20 feet from the apex of that turn that I tried to initiate and failed so miserably, and pounded my face into the ground. And I just basically roll up to a stand, and I'm not hurt in the slightest. I'm pissed off because I screwed up and I didn't make that turn, and it's embarrassing. And my buddies are down on the bottom, and they're like, "Hey, are you okay?" And I just give them the thumbs up because all they saw was a dude pile drive his head into the ground. And you know what? I'm totally fine. I'm absolutely perfect. I'm just pissed off. I broke the lens cap off the lens cover off my Sony camera, and I start looking around for it. I find that. Didn't even tear it off the helmet. I scratched up the helmet pretty good, but I didn't get hurt at all. And I'm gonna continue to wear the helmet too, because it was soft enough that I think I didn't do any major damage to the helmet. But if I had not been wearing a helmet, if I'd have just been up there, going with my hair on fire, like I'm on some four-wheeler or whatever, and done that without a helmet, I would have pile drive my face on the ground, and I would have needed to go to the hospital. We'd be talking multiple stitches, all these things. Who knows? It would tear my face off. I might actually be better looking because then I'd have like all these scars. The point of this is I wasn't hurt at all. I dusted myself off. I picked the bike back up. I went back down the hill, and I laughed with the guys, and I'm like, well, that sucked. And my helmet that was $650, now it was on my second ride on the thing, and now it's got some scratches on it, and it doesn't look new anymore. But you know what? I was totally fine because I'm prepared. And when you ride dirt bikes, definitely most of the time you're going to be prepared because you're like that exposed nerve that I talked about before. And so you're covering yourself up. You're putting some protective gear on, and you are having a ball. And your skills increase, and you build up the ability to maybe now hurt yourself seriously. And by the time you've gotten to that point, hopefully you have some wisdom behind you, and you're good to go. I firmly believe that dirt bikes are safer than a lot of these other things that we could be out doing. No, it's not totally safe. Like snowmobiling, I'm not a big-time snowmobiler, but hey, the terrain can kill you there. You could be the best snowmobiler in the world, and then all of a sudden some cornice breaks and whatever, and you're in an avalanche. I mean, people aren't dying on dirt bikes on avalanches. Now they are, sometimes on snow bikes. But the point is there's this is a whole nother set of options, too. If you're on a freaking snowmobile, you're out there in the middle of winter, and you can die of the elements a little bit easier than you can usually on a dirt bike. And the whole point is I feel like dirt biking gets a bad rap sometimes when it absolutely shouldn't. A lot of these other sports, a lot of these other hobbies that we do are actually in a lot of ways more dangerous. And I don't even want to take all the danger out. I mean, part of the reason why it is good and why it is fun and why it is fulfilling is because there is some risk there. I don't want to wipe that out. There are times when I get to, go do an obstacle or something, and you're like, oh, I can't believe this. And your heart is beating out of your chest. You are so nervous because hey, this could hurt. If I screw this up, this might hurt. I might break my bike. I might break a bone. And you're alive. You feel that fear and that adrenaline and that rush, and that helps you to know that you're alive. And this is one of the reasons why you're doing it, because it helps you to clear your head. It helps you to get those emotions out and get that adrenaline fix and get that dopamine hit. And this is your thing. And no, it's not totally safe, but it's a lot safer than you might think, especially if you've done it right and you've built up those skills over time. And I'm not worried about my boys at all on dirt bikes. Yes, I understand that we're going to have injuries, but it's all part of the process, and we're going to have a ball doing it. It's not that there aren't going to be tears. We already have tears sometimes with my boys. I've never cried when I was out on a ride other than tears of joy, but sometimes you want to. Sometimes it hurts so freaking bad you want to cry. But most of the rest of the time, it's so amazing that, yeah, you're still trying to choke back the tears sometimes because this is just incredible. You get a high off this and fulfillment out of this thing that you cannot get anywhere else. And you know what I'm talking about. If you listen this far in the podcast, you know exactly what I'm talking about. This sport does something to us that we cannot get anywhere else. And it's good, clean fun, with the exception of the fact that it's super dirty. Anyway, that's the point I wanted to drive home. I love this sport. I know you guys love this sport too. If you have, podcast suggestions that topic suggestions or whatever, send me an email, kyle@dirtbikechannel.com. You can send me an email there, and I can put it on the pile of things to do. I just want to tell you guys, thank you so much for the support that you've shown over this time. If you've listened to this long on the podcast, you're definitely one of the bigger fans. And I just want to thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe. Please share with your friends. The YouTube channel, the Facebook, Instagram, all the stuff that we're doing. It's a ton of fun. It's been very, very rewarding. And dirt bikes are safer. That is my topic for today. I hope you guys have a very, very good weekend. And we're going to catch you guys on the flip side next week. Okay, have a good one.